It's over, folks. The Toronto Raptors will not be the 2025 Summer League champions. Let's start the week off by breaking it all down.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
It's your favorite part of the day. Thanks for making Locked On Raptors your first listen every day. I'm Vivek Jacob. I've been covering the Toronto Raptors for 8 seasons across several outlets. You can follow Locked On Raptors on X, Instagram, Blue Sky, and YouTube. And be sure to check out the Locked On Raptors Discord, where you can talk all things basketball, but especially the Raptors. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first order. It is Monday, July the 21st, and I am going solo to recap the Toronto Raptors 98-88 loss to the Sacramento Kings in the Summer League semifinals. Previewed the game and talked about how this game was kind of going to be offense versus defense. That's kind of how it played out. The Kings, once again, pretty efficient, shot 50% for the game. But before we get into all that, we'll get into a more full recap than what I've been doing so far, since obviously this was the most meaningful game of the Summer League for the Raptors yet. Jonathan Mobo was back after a strained right hand left him out of the previous game. AJ Lawson did not play this one. He was ruled out with a bilateral hip adductor strain. And then you also had a change in the starting lineup. Ulrich Shomshe came in for Colin Castleton. One thing to keep in mind with the semifinals and the final, Summer League switches it up. So you go from having 10 fouls in those first 4 games to now having 6. And that was something that proved to be a bit of an issue for the Raptors. Something that has been an issue throughout the slow starts. First quarter, the Raptors don't have much going offensively once again. Raptors scored just 6 points in the first 7 minutes of this game, and the Kings go up 20-6. And this is where, you need your best players, your leaders, to kind of show the way. And unfortunately, Jamal Shead, Jacoby Walter didn't have much going, especially, not having AJ Lawson. You needed more from them offensively, and it just didn't happen. Colin Murray-Boyles, you kind of hoping that coming off that big 20-point night that he would have something extra for this one. Unfortunately, he had a bucket early. He had actually a tough finish inside in traffic that seemed like, it might be a sign of things to come, but he didn't score in the remainder of the quarter. And on the other end, Isaac Jones and Isaiah Stevens were just having their way, just getting whatever they wanted. Stevens, a lot of dribble penetration, kicking out for passes, for assists. And Isaac Jones, no one could handle him outside, whether it was Colin Murray-Boyles, Jonathan Mobo came in. Raptors trailed 28-16 after the first quarter, inauspicious start. But we've kind of see that be the trend for the Raptors at Summer League. So you're hoping second quarter things can start to turn around. Chucky Hepburn came in, and I thought he gave the Raptors some decent minutes. The main issue was the foul trouble. He was struggling to defend without fouling. And, maybe you can say there were 1 or 2 that were a little harsh, but you're going to get that too. He fouled out in 9 minutes, and that was not great. I mean, he got to the line, he was attacking, and honestly, at that stage of the game, the Raptors needed offense any way they could, so just getting to the free throw line was a relief, and seeing him knock down some free throws. It wasn't until there were 4 minutes left in the second quarter that the Raptors found something to actually stop the Kings. The Kings did go cold from 3. They ended the half. They had a stretch where they missed 11 straight 3-pointers, and that obviously helped. But the Raptors had a 13-4 run pretty much from the 4-minute mark of the second quarter. to cut the gap to 4 points. And Jameson Battle scored 7 points in that run. He had a three and then a couple of buckets. Just making cuts to the basket, nice layups, and that was a big run for the Raptors. And you're thinking, okay, the Raps are right in this. They're back. We've seen this script before, even though Devin Carter makes a tough shot right at the end of the half to push the lead back up to 6. You're saying, hey, the Raptors are right there. They've done this before. And we'll see how the third quarter plays out. But that third quarter did not play out well for the Raps. Kings came out and they went right back to Isaac Jones. He had 16 in the first half. Again, they just go to the well and they depend on him to score inside because they just felt like the Raptors didn't have an answer. And another part of this too is Shomshay getting the start. He was matched up against Maxime Reynaud, and Reynaud can hit the three, so he was kind of pulling Shomshay out to the perimeter, and then Isaac Jones was just too big, too strong for Mobo, too big, too strong for Colin Murray-Boyles, and just continue to dominate. Kings push the lead up to 73-51, 22-point lead, and at that point, you're thinking the Raptors just can't find any offense. And you see the Kings possession after possession just operating like a smooth machine. And the troubling fact for the Raptors was Nick Clifford didn't even have a good game. He was a guy that was dominating Summer League up to this point. And so for the Kings to be doing so well, leaning on Isaac Jones when Clifford wasn't having a good game, he finished with just 7 points on the night. That is probably something that the Raptors will look at and say, man, how do we let that happen and not take advantage of that fact? But just when you're thinking the Raptors are done, Elijah Martin and Jamal Shed, they spark a 9-2 run to end the third quarter, cut the deficit to 15 heading into the fourth, just giving you a glimmer of hope that maybe something can be made of this game. And then in the fourth quarter, there's a crucial thing that happens very early, just 1 minute in. Jonathan Mobo, trying to contest inside, gets called for a foul, and James Wade challenges the call. And they review it. They change it from a shooting foul to a foul on the floor. So that you could say is kind of a positive for the Raptors, but that was as positive as it got because it's still a foul on Mobo. On top of that, because there was no actual change of possession, the Raptors lose the challenge and get charged a timeout. It was their final timeout. So now the Raptors have to play the final 9 minutes without a timeout. And when you consider the fact that, Jacoby Walter was in foul trouble, or Shomshay was in foul trouble, was this really the situation to use it? I thought that was a poor use of the challenge by James Wade. And, as much as we can complain about the officiating, I just thought that was a bad decision, especially early in the fourth when, your team does have some momentum. Like, not much was going to change with that call. So I just thought that was a poor usage of that. And so now, credit for the Raptors, for continuing to plug away. And I think when you look at that stretch that happened after that, it was the Jamal Shed show. And I checked back in that stretch, he has 7 points and 4 assists, helping the Raptors cut the lead all the way down to 1. Jacoby Walter also scored 7 points in this stretch. So this is where you finally had, your leaders of this group show up and really make a game of it and apply some pressure. And how do the Kings respond? They just go back to the well. They go to the man Isaac Jones with that 1 point lead. He scores 9 straight points, helps push the lead back up. And now there's just 48 seconds left. and the Raptors can't get any closer. And that's all she wrote, folks. Well, not quite. 12 seconds left. James Wade at this point decides he needs to go at the officiating. As I mentioned, Jacoby Walter fouls out, Urish Shomshe fouls out, Chucky Hepburn fouls out. Mobo did finish with 5 fouls. So the Raptors didn't really get the rub of the green when it came to the calls. And so now he's drawing at the refs. He gets himself ejected, probably thinking, hey, okay, this game's over and done with. And after he gets ejected, he points at each ref and he says, let's call it a shot with an eye, because I can't say the word on here. And he's looking at each one and he points and he says, shot, shot, shot with an eye. But then he makes his way over to the Kings staff. So stepping up the class from the previous incident, and he goes over and he says congratulations to all the Kings coaching staff and shakes their hands, and then makes his way off the court. Quickly, I do want to give a shout out to Bipesh Mistry, who's the head coach of the Kings Summer League team, assistant on Doug Christie's staff. Super cool to see an Indian Canadian as a head coach at Summer League. So just wanted to give a quick shout out there. But yeah, coming back to this game, as I mentioned, the Kings were coming in with a hot offense, and it was going to be a good test for the Raptors in terms of how they could slow them down. The Kings end up shooting 49% from the field, only 29.6% from three. And so that's something that the Raptors will be happy about in terms of how they defended the three. But the turnover game wasn't quite there for the Raptors. The Raptors came in forcing 28 turnovers a game. The Kings had 19 turnovers in this one. The Raptors were only allowing 13 assists per game. The Kings get 23 assists in this one. And to me, that's pretty much the difference right there. All in all, I'll say it was kind of ridiculous that it was even a 1-point game in the fourth quarter. The Raptors just looked levels below the Kings offensively, and they had really good stretches defensively, but probably not the most consistent, I wouldn't say effort, but performance in terms of just getting stops. And I think this was probably the toughest guard combo that they faced, and they just really couldn't get a handle on, Devin Carter, on Isaiah Stevens. They combined for 13 assists in the game. As I mentioned, in opposing teams were totaling 13 assists. So for those two guards to come out and get 13 assists, credit to them getting the job done. And in the end, just the Raptors, that lack of creativity in the half court on the offensive end just came back to haunt them in the semis. And this is where the story ends. And in the next segment, we will get to the individual player performances. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. Having all my accounts in one app has been a game changer, and it's just so much easier to figure out exactly what I'm doing with all my money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. And we are back. We're going to talk about the individual player performances. As I said, it was a shock that the game was even a 1-point game at one point. Gotta give credit to Jamal Shed. I think at the end, when he spoke to the broadcast at the end of the third quarter and said the motto of this team is to keep chopping wood, and they just never let up. So even though you're down 22, he sparks that run at the end of the third along with Elijah Martin. And then in the fourth, he has a big fourth. He finished the game with 24 points, 12 assists, shooting 9 of 16 from the field. Had some tough drives, a couple of pull-ups in the mid-range, a couple of threes. So offensively, to see him get that high total, over 20 points in this one was a positive. What you wish for was that it came more so in the first and third quarters when the Raptors ended up digging themselves a hole that was ultimately too big to get out of. And that's where, when you look at Jamal Shed in this starting role, the energy was there, the intensity was there, the defensive tenacity was there, but they just couldn't find that offensive execution, especially in the half court. And I'm sure that's something that he will look at film in the summer or the rest of the summer and try to get better at. But credit to the compete level to make it a game late. And to me, that shows some real leadership quality. We'll talk about Jacoby. He finishes the game with 19 points. As I mentioned, fouled out, but similar to Shed, needed more in the first and third quarter. You look at those two quarters, Kings had a combined score of 55 to the Raptors 34 in those two quarters. And so that was the difference, right? And you just couldn't lose those quarters by as much as you did. And to be honest, we knew this was going to be the problem, and this is what showed up. And it's just something they're going to have to learn from and get better at. If there is, one thing that you look at and say, very encouraged by the positive of them, still finding a way to get to 19 and 24 points, finding a way to lead the fight back. It's another test, when you're right in the game, right? And when you can actually make that difference, as opposed to, hey, now you're down 20, maybe the opposing team has let up a little bit, and then that's when you make your comeback. You got to look at that balance and say, hey, how do we do things differently? I'll talk about Jamison Battle. Again, you're not going to get too much different with Jamison Battle. You know what he's going to come out there and do, and he's going to play within himself and not force the issue and all of that. But I thought this was a game to step out of that, right? You're missing AJ Lawson. You need an offensive spark, and I wish there was a way for him to just be more assertive and look for more shots in a game like this where you need it from him. And I kind of wish he had that real heat check vibe to him. He's someone that can definitely knock down 3 triples in 2 minutes, and it's oh, nice run there. But that microwave scoring effect, I think that's something that's a little bit missing with him. Probably the only times we saw it last season was the road game against the Pelicans, where both him and Jacoby Walter went off, and he shot 6 of 8 from 3 in that game. Other than that, it was the final game of the season where he plays 42 minutes and he goes 7 of 15 from 3. So those are the only 2 games where, he made 5+ threes. And so I think that's something that, and it's not like he didn't have opportunity, right? The final month pretty much of the season, he was getting plenty of minutes, 25+ minutes a game. So I think maybe that microwave effect isn't quite there from a shooter of his pedigree, and maybe that's something that he can look to add to his game, and just recognizing moments where, hey, I'm feeling it, let's just keep going, let's just keep pushing, right? Beyond that, CMB, Colin Murray Boyles, you wanted more than 4 points and just 5 field goal attempts after the 20-point game, and looking so encouraging in that. When I think about why there was a drop-off, I do think the Kings having increased size was a factor. The Warriors weren't a big team, and so he was maybe able to impose himself physically a bit more. But going up against Isaac Jones, Maxime Renaud, I think there was much more size to contend with. There wasn't as much of the screening actions, but at the same time, I don't think he was as assertive and kind of looking for his own offense. So that's something that I feel could have been different. Ulrich Shomshe, he gets the start, but I thought was rendered ineffective by having to defend the perimeter as much as he did against Renaud. Goes scoreless. And so that's something in general, maybe the guards look at and say, okay, why couldn't we get CMB and Shomshe some easy buckets? And is there something that we could have done more? And I think the answer should be yes. There should have been ways to find Shomshe and create opportunities for him. There should have been ways to create opportunities for Colin Murray-Boyles and get them some easy buckets. And especially in a game where you're trying to find ways to just score the ball, that's something I think the Raptors were lacking. Again, the size of the Kings was an issue, and they were completely outplayed in the front court. But you could have at least, given them the opportunity to fail, right? Like Murray-Boyles taking 5 shots, I think that's something that should not have been the case at the end of the game. Elijah Martin, I thought, had a good game. 10 points, 3 steals, and a decent spark off the bench. As I mentioned, he was part of the Raptors' best runs. So I think he finishes on a pretty solid note and something that he can be happy with. Yeah, I'm just kind of like going down the list here. Jonathan Mobo, obviously back in action after the sprained right hand. Don't know if that was impacting him in any way. But couldn't do much at all with Isaac Jones. Offensively, he didn't really have much. There was one play late, when the Raptors are trying to get quick buckets and pushing the pace. And, there was like this assertive moment where he just drove to the basket strong and finished. And maybe, there's certain points in the game where it's like, hey, you push the pace, you've created, open space for yourself. It's like, go ahead and take it. And so that's just a little thing, not going to make too much out of one play being a potential opportunity, but that's just something I saw. Ball to free throw, that was not pretty. Never want to see that, but yeah, that was a tough one. Coming back to, I just want to kind of finish on these summer league rules, coming down from the 10 fouls to the 6 fouls. Obviously, the Raptors had an issue with that, and I think for a team that has played such aggressive defense throughout to suddenly have to let up was maybe a challenge. And I'm just wondering if maybe there's a better way for Summer League to do it, where as opposed to having 10 fouls for the first 4 games and then suddenly going down to 6 in the semis and final, maybe you have 10 fouls for the first 2 games, and then you drop down to say maybe 8 for the next 2 games, and then to 6. I think the first 2 games, everyone's getting their feet wet. Everyone's just getting their first taste of it. So you have the 10 fouls to work with. A lot of times after the first 2 games, we see, the players who have kind of graduated from Summer League move on. And so now, you give those other guys the opportunity, and they've got to operate with 8 fouls. And then I think making that transition from 8 to 6 becomes easier. And I think, did it maybe affect the Raptors a bit more because of their aggressive style of defense? Maybe it did. Maybe it did. To wrap up, I'm just going to go through some overall takeaways from Summer League. Ready to wrap up here. And overall, I would say that this Summer League has been a success. I think we wanted to see this team defend and carry over that identity from the end of last season. And I think we definitely saw that, right? Like 4 wins on the bounce to get to the semis in itself was a really fun stretch to watch. And I don't think we can forget that with the semifinal loss. And throughout, they have really, really competed their butts off on the defensive end. The buy-in has been excellent. I mentioned this on the last podcast, but I'll mention it again because I think it's worth it. For a young group, it encourages me more that even with the offensive struggles, they keep coming at you defensively. The offense did not discourage the defense, and I think that's a big takeaway to have for this group. It tells you about their mentality. It tells you about their character, and I think that's something that they can really take encouragement from. For the offense, yeah, definitely. We mentioned this, discussed this throughout the course of this run. The half-court offense is not pretty, and that's why this team is so predicated on creating turnovers, getting out on the break, getting easy baskets. And so we need to see the offense take a leap. And that's not just on James Wade. We've seen even with Darko Rajakovic, when watching the team offensively, we see a lot of passing, but not necessarily the best results, right? And the Raptors have not been able to break through as some team with a high offensive rating. They've been bottom 5 in the offensive category. That's something that is going to be challenged this season, and we need to see an improvement in that regard. And I would say, unlike Darko here at Summer League, we did see things get pretty static, right? Like we see a lot of passes and a lot of assists under Darko's system. That was something that was not present here at Summer League. And, maybe you just didn't have the shot making for that. The Raptors didn't shoot the ball well from 3 throughout. They had shot 33% from 3 coming into this game, and then 29% here in the semifinals. So that's something that we know is going to be a weakness for this team, the 3-point shooting. But what that means also is that these players were playing, were being asked to do things that are outside of their role, right? And at the top of the list is Jacoby Walter, right? Like he's not going to have to take on so much shot creation when the real season begins. And he's going to be supplemented by a couple of starters ideally, and so his role will become that much more simplified. And you'd think that for pretty much all these guys, the only one that you'd say has a pretty similar role would be a Jamison Battle, would be a Jamal Shed. And in the case of Shed, you're saying, okay, there's going to be better players around him to finish off chances and make life easier for him, right? And so I think that's another thing to keep in mind with the offense. Like pretty much all these players will be going into lesser roles once the actual season begins, in terms of who will figure into the rotation. You expect Jamal Shed to factor in there. You expect Jacoby Walter to factor into it. And then after that, it's kind of a toss-up, right? And so, obviously Colin Murray-Boyles is going to get minutes after that. So those 3 guys we know for sure. Jamison Battle, we'll see how much he gets to play. Jonathan Mobo, we'll see how much he gets to play. And yeah, so I think the offensive role part of this is a big deal and worth keeping in mind. In terms of, standouts of the Summer League, I'd say Jacoby probably exceeded expectations once, that 26-point game. So I wouldn't put him on the list. And, he's someone that you hoped would be on the list. At least, for sure I did, but it didn't quite play out that way. I wouldn't say he was bad by any means. I'd say he was pretty much to expectations. Jamal, I'd put in a similar category. So those 2 were kind of at expectations, didn't necessarily exceed them. We saw what we wanted to. So standouts, AJ Lawson, I think, did himself a lot of good with the way he played. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how things play out for him. And, the Raptors might just say, hey, like the way he's bought in defensively, the way he's bought into the program, gives you a bit of that offensive spark plug. Obviously, he's a local. That's a little bonus there. Ulrich Shomshe, I think, stood out. Offense individually probably has a long way to go, but just watching him look a lot more comfortable, watching him just fit in and feel like he was, in rhythm with everything, with the pace of the game, and just understanding his defensive role and where to be and all of that. I think that was a big step up for him. So very encouraged by that. Elijah Martin had his moment, obviously a big first game. I think he finished off well these last 2 games in particular. So I think he's had a good run. CMB obviously had the one standout game unfortunately missed the first game, and then his actual debut was a kind of a mixed bag. But I think we'll see him next to better players in the regular season, and then maybe just see the best of him where he gets to really shine on the defensive end, and then kind of just make hustle plays on the offensive end, right? I think that's what he's best suited to doing at this stage of his career. Obviously, coming in as a rookie, and so we're gonna reduce the expectations a lot with this group once the regular season begins. Other guys, getting a first look at Chucky Hepburn. It's very evident that he can defend. Extremely clear that he can be a very good defender, can cause a lot of deflections, a lot of steals, gets right up in opposing players' jerseys, and gives them no airspace whatsoever. The offense has a very long way to go. That there's no question about. Scoring the ball, even at the G League level, I think is going to be interesting to see how that comes along. And yeah, I think that pretty much covers it for everyone. Jonathan Mobo, I think if there's one thing I wanted to see from him is whether there was progress in the touch, the interior touch, and he just didn't have many finishes like that to really say, okay, like that shows real growth. When Blake was on the show, we did talk about the fact that, most of his finishes inside were dunks, and that in itself is progress. He did not finish well around the basket at all. So for him to even just get those dunks consistently is a positive. We'll see how that plays out in the regular season, and if those opportunities even present themselves. But yeah, I think overall takeaways, biggest thing is a lot of the players got what they needed from this experience. They had set out with a goal of wanting to win this championship. They fell short in that regard, but I do think that having the 4 wins on the bounce to get to the semifinals, huge positive. And then, hey, taste this bitterness of your offense not being good enough and needing to level up, and use that for the rest of the summer to really improve in your individual aspects. If you want to carry on the discussion, head on over to the Locked On Raptors Discord. Link is in the description. Thank you for making Locked On Raptors your first listen today. For your second listen, find the Locked On NBA podcast, where there is no offseason. Doug, Matt, and Hayes keep you up to date on contract negotiations, rumors, and everything you need to be the most informed NBA fan. Find Locked On NBA on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.